Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Lacey Spears? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Lacey Elizabeth Spears was born on October 16, 1987, in Atwater, California. She lived with her parents Terry and Tina, as well as an older sister and an older brother. Her father was stationed at an Air Force base in Atwater. 6 weeks after Lacey was born, the Air Force base closed, and her family moved to Decatur, Alabama. This is about an hour and 15 minutes north of Birmingham. Terry worked as a welder, and Tina stayed home with Lacey and her siblings. From an early age, Lacey had a profound interest in children. She loved to babysit for people in the area. In 2006, she graduated from high school. Lacey found work in a daycare and moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with her sister. They split the rent, which was $525 a month. For a short time, Lacey was enrolled in nursing school. At this point in her life, babysitting was still a frequent activity for Lacey, but she ran into a few difficulties. She would often act like the children she was babysitting were her own, which of course did not make the parents happy. They found Lacey's behavior to be creepy and worrisome. Furthermore, many of the children she watched ended up with mysterious ear infections. One by one, Lacey's babysitting customers dropped her. One of Lacey's neighbors in the apartment complex was a garage door installer named Chris Hill. The couple had a brief sexual relationship which did not involve the use of protection. Chris would later describe sex with Lacey as cold and passionless. In March 2008, Lacey became pregnant with Chris's child. Not long after this, she rejected Chris as a romantic partner, telling him the relationship was over and she never wanted to see him again. Lacey also lied and told Chris that he was not the father. Rather, the father was a police officer named Blake. She claimed that Blake was a former boyfriend. However, in reality, the two had just briefly dated. Lacey not only lied to Chris, she told everyone that Blake was the father. On December 3, 2008, Lacey had a son named Garnett Paul Thompson Spears. Right away, Garnett appeared to have mysterious medical problems. When he was 5 days old, Lacey took Garnett to a hospital with an ear infection and a high fever. When he was 10 weeks old, she claimed he stopped breathing. Medical providers found that Garnett's sodium level was elevated. He was airlifted to another hospital and successfully treated, but the physicians didn't understand the cause. When Garnett was 9 months old, a gastrointestinal tube was inserted in his stomach. This is also referred to as a G-tube. It allows nutrients to be delivered directly into the digestive system. Later, a physician who treated Garnett questioned whether the G-tube was still needed, but Lacey never had it removed. Some of Lacey's friends noticed that Garnett appeared to have a good appetite and ate normally. They were puzzled as to why the G-tube was still in place. In 2010, Lacey and Garnett moved to Clearwater, Florida, and lived with Lacey's maternal grandmother. To make a living, Lacey received public assistance, cleaned houses, and returned to babysitting. She was able to babysit again because people in that area did not know about her reputation. While in Clearwater, Lacey continued to take Garnett to hospitals for medical emergencies. One time, Garnett had a staph infection. On another occasion, blood was coming from his ears and nose. No medical provider could explain where these symptoms were coming from. Lacey was a member of a parenting group. In June 2011, a member of the group reported Lacey to the Department of Children and Families, claiming that Lacey would slap Garnett until he cried, then show him affection. The department closed the case after finding nothing during their investigation. On March 31, 2012, Lacey posted on social media claiming that Blake had been killed in a tragic motor vehicle collision. Again, Blake was the police officer who Lacey falsely claimed was Garnett's father. He was very much alive. In November 2012, Lacey and Garnett moved to Chestnut Ridge, New York, which is just over an hour north of New York City. They lived in an apartment on the grounds of an alternate lifestyle group called the Fellowship Community. This nature-oriented cooperative had an objective of caring for the elderly, and Lacey was one of the caregivers. During her time there, she told people that Blake had been reincarnated as an owl and had all types of decorative owls in her apartment. This must have been confusing for Blake when he found out about these lies later on. He went from being Garnett's father to being killed in a motor vehicle collision, and now to being an owl. Of Lacey, he may have been thinking, who does this woman think she is? Who? Lacey continued her pattern of taking Garnett to see multiple physicians. She reported various conditions, many of which had been ruled out by other physicians. Yet Lacey kept telling people Garnett was seriously ill. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On January 17, 2014, Lacey brought Garnett to a hospital about 10 miles away and informed the staff that he had 3 seizures. Garnett was admitted and monitored as Lacey stayed with him in the hospital room. A camera was positioned in Garnett's room to record any seizure activity. Lacey was aware of this camera. 2 days later, on January 19, 2014, Garnett complained of a severe headache, so medical providers tested his blood. An extremely high level of sodium was detected. Just after 9 p.m., Garnett was airlifted to a different hospital just across the Hudson River in Westchester County. Initially, his condition appeared to improve, but then, on January 21, it worsened dramatically. On January 22, Lacey posted on Facebook, quote, "Tonight I sat at the bedside of my beautiful, amazing, lively, one-of-kind son's bed. His soul is already with the angels. There's just no words to describe this horrible nightmare. Please pray. Garnett's journey into the next life is nothing short of amazing." Unquote. Garnett died the next day, January 23, 2014, from cerebral edema. He was 5 years old. Lacey posted on Facebook saying, quote, "Garnett the Great journeyed onward today at 10:20 a.m., unquote. By this time, a physician had already contacted Child Protective Services after realizing that Garnett's fatal symptoms may have been caused by the introduction of salt into his G-tube. A medical examiner reached a similar conclusion after performing an autopsy. Ultimately, Child Protective Services involved law enforcement. Here's what the police found during the course of their investigation. On January 13, 2014, 4 days before Garnett was taken to the hospital, Lacey made curious internet searches including normal sodium levels for a child, dangers of high sodium levels in a child, and signs of elevated sodium levels. On January 19, 2014, before Garnett was airlifted to the hospital in Westchester County, the camera in his room captured Lacey and Garnett entering the bathroom. Lacey was carrying a white cup and what appeared to be an attachment that connected to the G-tube. Shortly after this, Garnett exited the bathroom, complaining of a severe headache. After Garnett recovered from the headache, Lacey was captured again doing the same thing with the white cup and the attachment. Garnett developed a severe headache, just like he had before. This is what led to the discovery of the high sodium level. On April 4, 2014, Garnett's manner of death was ruled homicide. On June 17 of that year, Lacey was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter. Her trial started in February 2015. On March 2, she was found guilty of second-degree murder. Just over a month later, on April 8, Lacey was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. The judge indicated it was clear that Lacey had a mental disorder, which is why he did not impose a harsher sentence. Lacey Spears will be eligible for parole in 2034, in her mid-40s. Now moving to my analysis. Lacey Spears maintains her innocence. She claimed that she never did anything to hurt her son, Garnett. There was no mental health component to Lacey's defense. Her defense attorneys blame the hospital for Garnett's death. The state, of course, disagrees. They believed the evidence of Lacey's guilt was clear. This brings me to the question, was Lacey guilty of murder? Let's take a look at the evidence, both for and against the idea that she was guilty, starting with the inculpatory factors. Lacey had a long history of reporting mysterious medical symptoms for Grande. She repeatedly lied about who Garnet's father was and falsely claimed his father had been killed in a motor vehicle collision. 10 days before Garnett died, Lacey made suspicious internet searches about sodium. Prior to Garnett's death, Lacey had sent text messages to friends describing his serious medical problems. The information she provided was inconsistent with what physicians had detected. Right before Garnett's condition worsened, Lacey was captured on camera entering a bathroom with him. The cerebral edema that killed Garnett was caused by an extremely high level of sodium in his system. There was no natural explanation for a sodium level increasing that dramatically. Before the lab work that detected the sodium was completed, Lacey specifically asked about sodium levels. In Lacey's apartment, the police found 2 open containers of salt in the kitchen. They also found 2 feeding bags, which contained high levels of sodium. Moving to the exculpatory factors, Lacey's defense argued that the hospital changed Garnett's diet, which may have led to dehydration. Also, the fluids he was being given intravenously contained sodium. When Lacey went to the bathroom with Garnett, she did not close the door, meaning people could have easily seen what she was doing. That's pretty much it for exculpatory factors. When considering all the evidence, do I think that Lacey was guilty of murder? Yes, in my opinion, she was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Instead of blaming the hospital, her defense should have focused on possible mental illness. This brings me to the question, did Lacey Spears suffer from factitious disorder imposed on another? This disorder is sometimes referred to as Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Let's take a look at some of the typical characteristics of perpetrators who have factitious disorder imposed on another and compare them to Lacey's behavior. I will describe each characteristic in a separate item. Item number 1. Factitious disorder is characterized by a caregiver intentionally inducing, falsifying, or exaggerating manifestations of physical or mental health symptoms in a person who is under their care. The symptoms they fabricate are unexplainable, recurrent, inconsistent with reported history, and often resolve when the victim is removed from the perpetrator. Perpetrators tend to visit many different physicians. Lacey repeatedly lied about Garnett's medical condition. She took him to over 20 different physicians and made false reports. No medical explanation for Garnett's symptoms was ever generated. Lacey would not return to see any physician who started to figure out what was going on, and she moved a couple of times. Item number 2, 90% of individuals with factitious disorder are the biological mother of the victim. Lacey was Garnett's biological mother. Item number 3, many perpetrators with the disorder are pathological liars. Lacey had a long history of deception. She would tell increasingly dramatic and fanciful lies until getting a reaction. She lied about medical conditions, she lied about the identity of Garnett's father, and lied about many other topics. Item number 4, many perpetrators with factitious disorder have cluster B personality pathology, that is, narcissistic, antisocial, borderline, or histrionic personality features. Lacey was attention-seeking, self-centered, shallow, talkative, excitement-seeking, sadistic, vindictive, petty, immature, insecure, manipulative, and deceptive. Item number 5, factitious disorder perpetrators typically have extensive knowledge of medical terminology. Lacey studied nursing and repeatedly worried physicians through her use of medical terms. Item number 6, perpetrators with the disorder tend to be sadistic and enjoy seeing their victims suffer. They often become gleeful and excited when witnessing pain, especially when their victim is close to death. Lacey appeared to be fascinated and pleased by Garnett's suffering. She would tell the story of his pain to anyone who would listen. Lacey was not interested in developing a career. She was not interested in dating. She had no other goals in her life except to gain joy from the suffering of her son. Moving back to the question, did Lacey Spears have factitious disorder imposed on another? There is no way to know for certain, but many clinicians believe she did, and there was significant alignment between the symptoms of the disorder and Lacey's behavior. Now moving to my final thoughts. Despite being suspected of factitious disorder by many different professionals, Lacey's destructive behavior was never stopped. 3 days before Grande died, one of Lacey's friends visited him in the hospital. He pleaded with her, "Don't leave me." To another friend, Grande said, "You promise you're going to come to my house and get me?" He had no way to know what was actually happening, but Grande knew that he was in danger. Unfortunately, no one successfully interceded on his behalf. He was left to contend with a mother who gained sadistic pleasure from his suffering. Those are my thoughts on the case of Lacey Spears. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.